Let's talk about the process of building a budget and making sure that the goal setting that we're doing and the budget that we're building around those goals, and then the work that gets done that works to accomplish those goals, is all in proper alignment, and that we've got this kind of linkage that we're seeking. Earlier we talked about the National Advisory Council for State and Local Budgeting, and that tends to still be the best thinking that's been done recently about how best to structure an approach to budgeting. And they've really broken it down into 4 big chunks, and I really like the way they think about this. The first big one is broad goals, and I just love the way that's described. Big, non-time encumbered ideals that are what you're pursuing in your community by virtue of the work you're doing in your city. Things like public safety, quality of life, and these are obviously overly generic and hard to get your arms around concepts, but they're by definition. It's a long-term general focus on what it is we're here to accomplish. It's our purpose. And we need to start there. We need to be clear about why we're here. What is it that you and your city hall are doing on behalf of your community? What are your broad goals? And you can inform these goals through conversations with your community itself. Why do they think you're there? Why is it that they are entrusting you with the various taxes and the resources that they are giving you to help accomplish things on their behalf in the community? These are what you want to characterize as your broad goals. This provides overall direction then for the more finite goals that are going to follow on and be more instrumental in developing specific plans. Now, these broad goals may already exist. If you have a strategic plan, or maybe you focused on this element in your comprehensive plan, then typically you're going to have this kind of thinking included there, and just leverage that. You don't need to go recreate it. In fact, you want to make sure that what you do is consistent with what you've already said is important to you and your organization. For instance, a transportation plan. You may have some broad goals around the way you want to tailor transportation choices and whatnot in your community. That's an opportunity for you to start with that instead of rebuilding it. Now, this development of broad goals is not a routine function of any city council. This isn't a line item on your business agenda. This requires some specific carved out time to think about these kinds of things in this unique kind of way. And so I always recommend a retreat of some sort, call it what you will, and to get out of the normal setting where you do your day-to-day business, because this requires a fresh mindset, a different approach. This also benefits from community input. Think about what kind of ways you can engage the community to help you think about things that they are thinking about, whether that be a survey or focus groups or some other forum. Maybe it's attending meetings that already exist in your community and just leveraging from those as well. Maybe it's using the local media and getting the word out and collecting ideas, maybe via your website. Lots of ways that you can collect community input. Along with that, you want to do an environmental scan. You want to think what's going on out here. And here I don't mean environment as in green and sustainability, but more about what's happening out there. What's the economy look like? What kinds of issues are people dealing with? Do you have specific big deals that are going on in your community right now that really need to be factored into your thinking? That's important to keep in mind as well. Once you've got your broad goals, the next step is then to develop approaches that achieve those goals. So one of the elements here is your financial policies. How do you be sure that the budget you develop is financially responsible? You want to create some parameters around your thinking with respect to the way you deploy those resources that will be consistent from time to time. Sure, you're going to review it every budget cycle and make sure it's still relevant, but before you get into the fray about deciding around specific issues that are brought to you to consider, think about what are the right ways to think about those issues. Put up those ground rules before you're asked to make the call. What are the strategies that advance your broad goals? What kinds of things are you involved in that focus on those goals, and are they in alignment? What are the lines of business you're in? What do you want to emphasize or de-emphasize? A program inventory is a great way to start. What kinds of things are people doing, and how did they fit in? It was interesting, one organization I was in, we did a program inventory and worked to create the alignment with the broad goals and found there wasn't as much alignment as we presumed. It was very helpful for us to think our way forward. And I suggest that that would be helpful in your community as well. Long-term financial planning can be helpful in this respect as well. You may decide that an emphasis in one area or another is important, but can you sustain that emphasis? If you've got grant resources, for instance, that allow you to start something new that is consistent with your broad goals, begin thinking right away about how to fill the gap when that grant expires, if that's going to be an ongoing need. I've included an example here where this community has created some big broad goal thinking in the first column, and then allocated those goals to responsibilities in the middle column, and then specifically decided who is responsible for making progress on these goals in the far right column. A good way to create some consistency in terms of the allocation from broad goals into specific strategies and action plans. So then this budget that we're talking about needs to reflect these goals, and what you do in the budget needs to provide the resources to the right areas of emphasis. So start with budget instructions. Make sure the people that are putting the budget together know what you're thinking in terms of what it is you're trying to accomplish, where your emphasis is going to be during this particular budget cycle. What kinds of things maybe aren't going to be emphasized. Maybe it's not this year's not the year for investments in improved park facilities because it's the year for something else, and vice versa. So communicate that through budget instructions. This works both when you're expanding the budget, but even maybe I would suggest more importantly when you're contracting the budget, like we've seen the last couple of years. It's important to make sure those decisions are made in a very focused way that are consistent again with the direction that we want to provide in terms of the way these resources get spent and what we're trying to accomplish in our community. Often I hear that it's more about expansion, but it's just as important when the budgets aren't expanding, in fact when they're contracting. And the way we make sure that we are making progress on these specific actions and activities with respect to these goals is through performance measures. And we're seeing performance measures more and more adopted in medium and even smaller organizations to help provide policymakers and the community assurance that we are providing performance and we are indeed working to be effective in what we are accomplishing on behalf of these goals. So a financial plan that focuses on these areas and illustrates that well is going to be a very effective tool in working with your community and assuring them that their resources are being well used. Once that budget is adopted, we'll need to monitor it. We'll need to make sure it's performing the way we expected. We need to monitor it from a financial perspective. Are the revenues coming in like we anticipated, so the resources therefore are available to be spent on the things we've decided are important? And then are we spending in line with those revenues, both from a spending discipline standpoint, and then sometimes spending is informed by things that we don't have control over. And is that kind of a thing going on? An example there would be, for instance, jail costs. Are those jail bills higher than we expected, and do we need to adjust in order to respond to them? An organization that emphasized the better behavior in its downtown core found its jail costs were going up, and so that's an example of where they needed to monitor and make some adjustments because it was a sign of success, but at the same time they needed to adjust the financial plan accordingly. Not just the financial plan needs to be monitored though. I mentioned performance measures a moment ago, and some sort of monitoring of performance measures is important as well. Budget amendments are necessary when you want to change the budget appropriation level. The budget can be adjusted within those appropriations, say for instance from one department or one program to the next administratively without an amendment. But if you need to change appropriation levels, you'll want to use a budget ordinance.